Welcome to No Longer Conformed, my online preaching and teaching ministry. We're studying the book of 1 Corinthians, Serve in Unity. In this session, we'll be looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 6. Love is tough. There are many sad stories in the Bible. David wrote one in Psalm 41, verse 9. He said, "Even my friend in whom I trusted, one who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me." Who was the friend that betrayed David's love and trust? Well, some scholars believe it was David's own son Absalom, who tried to steal his kingdom. In 2 Samuel chapter 15, verses 1 through 15. David fled Jerusalem as Absalom rode into town like a conquering hero. The rebellion ended when David's soldiers found Absalom hanging by his hair in a tree and killed him. It's hard to imagine which event hurt David more, the death of his son or the betrayal of his son. Pain of betrayal is deep and tests the strength of relationships. Issues will at some point stress all relationships. This was true throughout the Bible. Esau was swindled by his own brother. Leah lived with a husband who loved another woman. John Mark abandoned Paul on his first missionary journey. The prophet Hosea struggled with an adulterous wife. Jesus was betrayed by one of his own followers, one of his closest followers. Let's look at this, and let's look at, again, the larger passage, beginning with verse 4 of chapter 13. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. How does agape love behave when your spouse, your child, or your best friend dabble with immoral or destructive behavior? The apostle said love remains tough and true. In verse 6 he wrote, "Does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth." By writing those words, Paul identified facts about love and relationship. First of all, love will face trials. Romans 14:7. Our sin impacts our relationships. And Romans 14:7 reminds us that none of us lives to himself and no one dies to himself. Sometimes we try to convince ourselves that our behavior does not impact anyone but ourselves, but that is not true. The alcoholic, the drug addict, the abuser, the thief, they all affect their relationships by their actions. Love and iniquity are incompatible. Paul uses 3 key words. Notice the word rejoice. It comes from the same root as joy, but here he implies that it is a shared joy. Paul writes the word iniquity, which literally means the condition of not being right. He mentions the word truth. This refers to that which is right or correct. Love then does not rejoice with or derive any joy from someone who's doing wrong. Iniquity damages the shared joy of relationship. Satan will use personal habits to disrupt relationships. He hates the sight of love and will sow iniquity any way he can. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 1. But there were also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who bought them, and bring on themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. But by covetousness they will exploit you with deceptive words. For a long time their judgment has not been idle, and their destruction does not slumber. Second, love must remain tough. John chapter 8, verse 7. If you love someone and they fall to temptation, what should you do? Ignore their sin? Defend their failure? No, walk humbly. John chapter 8, verse 7 teaches us that he who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. With that thought in mind, we must also realize that Paul told us love must be tough. Call sin by its proper name. Our culture prefers to dismiss all responsibility for moral failure. We have even tried to anesthetize our conscience by renaming our failures. We have chemical dependencies. We have temporary insanity. We have road rage. Listen, condemn sin for what it does. Sin is wrong. In Corinth, the fellowship experienced a case of incest by a member of the church. The church refused to call the behavior wrong. In love, we must tell those we care about that to pursue destructive lifestyles is wrong and will hurt both them and the relationship. Confront sin before it destroys. Love will not support nor enable a destructive lifestyle. Even in peer relationships, teenagers face a moral dilemma when a friend dabbles with drugs, violence, sex, or alcohol. A friend must answer these two questions. Do you risk losing their friendship by confronting or addressing their problem, or do you watch them destroy their life without trying to help them? If you do not confront them, you will lose them anyway. Correct sin whenever possible. The goal is restoration, not condemnation. The goal is not judgment, but compassion. Paul wrote in Galatians 6, in verse 1, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, Jesus said, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you've gained your brother. We cannot force anyone to change, but we must be willing to help them. And then third, love stands on the truth. After stating the negative, Paul tells us that we can rejoice with those who are committed to the truth. Love declares the truth, even when it's difficult, and honors God. Love must be built on truth, not perfection. Love demonstrates the truth. Elizabeth Browning wrote, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Jesus asks, how do you love me? Show me the ways. Peter seemed to destroy his relationship with Jesus by his denials. John chapter 21. But Jesus asked him if he loved him. When Peter said he did love the Lord, Jesus told him to show it by his actions. Love defends the truth. One of the important questions we must consider is, will we stand for what is right? Will we ignore or deny the truth about the moral failure of those we love? This is when love must be both tough and true. Be willing to hate sin and confront it when necessary, but be committed to love the sinner with unconditional love. Hate sin, love the sinner. Hate sin, love the sinner. Hate sin, love the sinner. You have a great day.